gonna do something a little different, but when I came here, some of the materials I was gonna collect wasn't really ready. Hi everybody, my name's Corey. I'm a regenerative soil scientist. I was actually born here in Mount Shasta, down at May Springs, if you guys know where that's at. I was born there in the middle of winter in an unsanctioned cabin that my dad built. And I have always had a deep connection to nature. I've always been out in the woods, enjoying the great outdoors. Had an affinity for identifying plants and collecting things and looking at bugs and starting fires and all the things. So I, for a long time, I've always been very outdoor focused. And as I got older, I realized how much of the system is kind of trying to get us in the opposite direction. It's trying to get us into boxes and into cities and onto our screens and get disconnected from nature. And when I got into farming, I realized how systematically implemented that is on a large scale. I mean, we've been spraying toxic chemicals that were invented during World War to kill people on our plants, to kill bugs, and we think that that's okay, and it's not. There's a lot of issues that we deal with in agriculture, one of them primarily being with the toxification of soils and plants. I don't know if you know this, but there's a term called the dirty dozen. The dirty dozen is all of the fruits that have the highest pesticide loads on them, and strawberries and blueberries and blackberries are among the highest, which is kind of wild because you can go out in the wild and collect those. They have no problems growing at all. And we might think and look back to nature and say, why is that? Why is it that plants out in the wild have no problem growing, yet we're on a farm and they have a really hard time growing? They struggle constantly, and we have to spray them with pesticides so that the bugs don't kill them or they don't get rot with disease, and we're constantly having to apply amendments and fertilizers and all these different things. And you don't see anyone doing that out in the forest. You don't go out in these woods here and say, someone's gotta be fertilizing this. No, and actually nowhere in the wild are they fertilizing the forest. Forests grow abundantly and all on their own. And can you guess why that is? Does anyone here have a guess on why that is?
Because stuff dies and makes the soil.
That's one part. What does stuff dying attract?
Lots of critters.
Critters.
In the soil.
Bugs, microbes. There's a whole ecosystem of organisms that have developed over eons, specifically to break down organic matter, to decompose rocks, to take what comes from the mountain. Literally, soil is formed through two processes: erosion and decomposition. It's rocks. Originally, like the hearth behind you could become rocks or could become soil. And I've actually seen this directly. If you put a load of gravel down, and through a long time it sits there, and eventually it becomes decomposed rock. It starts to turn into this fine material where it was once gravel, and now it's like almost like soil, but not quite. And that's because the microbes and the moisture and everything that's present actually starts decomposing those rocks. They have organic acids that they produce that actually demineralize and release the nutrients that are inside the rocks. And so when we understand this, we can kind of step back into the patterns of nature and recognize that the earth has developed the most advanced, complex system of self-reorganizing and fertilization that we could ever even conceive of. And this is done through natural selection and a self-optimized system where everything that's involved in this system is actually designed to enhance and increase resiliency and stability of the environment. But us, humans, feel like we're better than that. We think we can come into a system and eradicate everything, take full control over it all, and say, we're gonna just inject this plant with direct nutrients, we're gonna kill all the biology, we're gonna sterilize the soil, and think that we're gonna grow plants, healthy plants. It's not the case. And in fact, there are studies that are being done recently that show a vast majority of the crops that are grown in the US are dramatically lower in nutrient density than they were back in the 70s. And even before that. And we can measure this through simple tools, something like a Brix meter is a Brix refractometer. Chefs used to use these, like Italian chefs used to test tomatoes before they bought them because they wanted to make sure that they were high enough Brix to make their food with. Well, they stopped doing that. You know why? Because you can't find any tomatoes that are high enough Brix for that. None. Nowhere can you go to buy tomatoes that will result in the flavor and quality of a sauce that they used to make decades ago. Nowhere. You just can't find the nutrient density which correlates to flavor and plant health. And it's sad. And that's actually the biggest reason why we have such a problem with disease in this country. Yes, because of the poisons that they apply and all the things in the air and everything that we're being bombarded with, you know, electromagnetic frequencies and everything combined, it stacks on top of each other. But a big factor of it is that food is medicine. But it's not now. Food used to be medicine when it was full of all the minerals and nutrients that we actually need for our bodies. But now farming is systematically designed to be NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. That's all they care about because those are the three things that they noticed that drove yield, which correlates to profits. So our system isn't designed for nutrient quality or health, it's designed for profits. And so after getting out of my bubble here in Mount Shasta and traveling around and learning about these things and studying permaculture and studying natural systems, I realized how important it is for us to go back to where we used to be. And in fact, indigenous cultures and communities and tribes around the world have practiced these things that I'm going to talk about today for centuries. Something I recently got into is called Korean natural farming. It's not actually a Korean technique. It originates in several different places, but the basis of it is they culture microbes and feed it back to the soil. They culture different things and feed it to the plants. We can do this very easily. We can culture vinegar, which has a load of different microbes in it that chelate minerals. We can culture plant juices and fermented extracts, and we can culture wild indigenous microorganisms. Like you go out in the forest out here into these old growth trees that have never been disturbed before. The soil has never been changed. It has been growing for thousands of years undisturbed. When we, in our forestry practices, they cut down forests, they spray glyphosate, they spray these different chemicals to keep the weeds down and to reduce these various different things. It kills the microbiome in the soil, and then they go back and plant them. Why do you think we're having such a hard or a huge problem with the pine beetle and forests dying off, and we're having massive droughts? because the plant has lost its ability to upregulate nutrients, to find water, to actually access these things that are deep within the soil. Everything that we need to grow healthy plants is already in the soil. We just need to access it. And that's what microbes do. Microbes are our allies. They are the fundamental, building blocks to healthy life. We know this because probiotics in our gut, right? You take probiotics to be healthy, and we know that we have a microbiome that dictates how healthy we are. If you stripped all that microbiome away, we're really unhealthy people. And so we have a term in natural farming that is doing Korean natural farming, or natural farming as I like to call it because it didn't originate in Korea. We take rice and we can put a box of uncooked or hard cooked rice, like al dente rice, put it out into the forest in these undisturbed areas, and the microbes that have been developing for eons in that soil will actually move into the rice because it's an easy, simple food source. And it happens fast. Within 5 days, you have this cake. Have you seen mushroom blocks? You go to the store, you might buy a mushroom block, right? It's like this white myceliated mass. Well, that's a single organism that they've selected in a laboratory to grow one type of mushroom. You go out into the forest, you do the same thing, you put a box of rice out, you're gonna get 1 billion different microbes, dozens and dozens, hundreds if not thousands of types of fungi. You have bacteria, amoeba, flagellates, you have all these different organisms that are part of the soil food web that exist in the soil, and they will move into the rice. Primarily, it's capturing a lot of fungi because of the food source that we have. So we take this, and it's like a snapshot of a healthy, living forest floor. And we can actually move that into our garden. We can transplant that into our soil, and it's like a fecal transplant for the earth. Have you ever heard of the fecal transplant? So you know that you can take healthy feces from a human that is really, really healthy and transplant it into a human that is unhealthy, and it completely transforms their health. That's what we're doing with natural farming. We're taking healthy living plants from the wild, healthy living organisms, and we're incorporating that into our garden. And when we wildcraft these things, it doesn't cost anything except for like the cost of a bag of rice or the cost of some sugar. And we can do that on a pretty large scale for a fraction of the cost. I don't know if you guys know what the metrics are around farming and what the cost is of farming, but most farmers are losing money. Farmers actually have one of the highest suicide rates of any occupation because it is so hard and they don't get paid for it. Do you know that wheat on average is $111 negative net returns? That's you're losing money every single year if you're farming wheat. But they subsidize that for you. Oh, you can just keep farming, we'll subsidize it for you. But the subsidizes just goes back into fertilizer corporations, pesticides, and all this different stuff that just supports the megacorps. So it's a sick, diseased system all around, making sick, diseased people with a sick, diseased earth. And so we can transform that. We can literally flip it on its head, 180 degrees, and turn the entire industry into something that regenerates the soil, that regenerates the people, that regenerates the land and everything around it. When you start doing these things, it attracts all these different microbes, and the microbes attract these birds, and they attract worms, and the worms attract other things, and it starts creating its own ecosystem that feeds on itself. And this is why it's so important to start adopting regenerative farming practices, to start utilizing these things that cost very little but take a lot of time to learn. They take effort to actually take the time and think and use your brain and be like, okay, I'm willing to take the time that it takes to learn how to culture these microbes, to culture these organisms, and to like make the inputs yourself. Current farming systems doesn't take any brain power. All you gotta do is bring your wallet to the farm store and buy some inputs. Someone else tells you what to do. And you say, okay, I guess I'll do that. You go out and you try it, and there you have sick, diseased plants that require more inputs, more fertilizers, more pesticides, and you lose money. So we can learn how to go out into the forest and collect wild indigenous microbes, and we can take the communities that are living inside plants. Plants have biomes just like we do. You know, we take probiotics. It's kind of funny because plants are full of probiotics. Plants themselves actually have endophytes in them. An endophyte is an organism that lives inside the tissues of the plant. Did you know that lactic acid bacteria is actually a plant growth promoting endophyte? It lives in our gut. It also lives in plants. We are not so different from plants. This whole ecosystem, this whole earth is just a fractal of micro to macro. Many of the organisms that live in our gut actually live in the soil, well, healthy soil. They live in healthy plants. And so we can go out and we can collect these things and we can bring them back to our farm and we can apply them to our plants, and it makes a world of a difference. We start to completely shift the ecosystem from something that was sick and diseased and plants that are unhealthy, producing low Brix. As I mentioned earlier, Brix is actually a measurement of plant health. Chefs used to use that as a measurement of how quality their fruit was. But we didn't understand back then that it's actually a direct correlation to how much nutrients the plant is uptaking. So we can take a Brix reading of a plant leaf and we'll see that pretty much a vast majority, if not 90% of all crops that are grown are in the 3 or less Brix range of a plant leaf. That means it's very sick and diseased. There's a chart that shows bugs and their attraction to plants at certain Brix levels. And this tells us that a healthy plant above 14 Brix, or 12 Brix is like the line, above 12 Brix, no bug is interested in that plant at all. Grasshoppers are the top of the food chain, where they have the highest Brix levels. If you have a 10 Brix plant, it'll be impervious to all the other pests except for grasshoppers. Because grasshoppers are the top of the food chain. We're the top of the food chain too. So we actually want Brix that are even higher. We want 14, 20 Brix if we can. That's a healthy plant. A plant that is under 10 Brix, like 6 to 10, that's when you have, aphids and sucking insects. Below that, like 6 to 3, you have spider mites and fungal diseases and all kinds of different stuff that is just taking over your plant. Because these organisms and these bugs are designed by nature to take out the diseased and sick organisms. You know why? So that the healthy ones can survive. The healthy ones that are actually able to uptake nutrients, that are actually able to thrive in that environment, will reseed and regrow, because it's a constantly evolving system that is designed to increase resiliency. So, insects are the trash cans of the earth. They're responsible for taking out the sick and diseased plants. Go ahead, please, take all the diseased plants. We can grow better ones. We can have healthier soil that'll produce plants above the threshold where those insects, it's literally not edible for them. Because when the plant starts having a higher Brix level, it's actually telling us that instead of producing simple sugars, monosaccharides, which if you're feeding your plant synthetic nutrients like synthetic nitrogen or all these just synthetic fertilizers that are salt-based fertilizers, your plant is producing different enzymes in it. It's actually producing monosaccharides rather than polysaccharides. Polysaccharides are complex sugars that are too complex for pests to actually eat. Their gut, their biome that they're meant to feed on can't actually digest it. They sense that that food is inedible for them. So they go on searching for something that is diseased and that nature wants them to take out. And so when we understand this, we can actually grasp this. We can start to completely reframe how we grow. And we can completely reshift the environment and rebuild soil and create healthy plants that then create healthy humans. So, does that make you excited? Does that make you like, wow, something could actually change? We can have a healthy, happy world if we actually implemented this on scale. But you know what that means? We have to stop buying fertilizers from the store. We actually have to learn something. We have to take the time. Look how many people are in this room. This is how many people are actually interested in learning how to grow healthy food, to actually invest their time into soil. It's actually sad, because our entire society is programmed to think, oh, I want to be an influencer, that's the way how I'm going to make money. I'm going to share something online and become famous. You don't become famous by going out into your garden and growing healthy plants. But you know what you do become? Impactful. Someone who is healing the planet through their actions, not saying what they want to do through their words, just for a like. So, I'm going to show you exactly what we can make in this process, and I'm going to show you how awesome it is and the end result. So, one of the things we do in natural farming is, as I was saying, we culture microbes. But we don't just culture microbes, we can actually capture enzymes and hormones through osmosis. Enzymes and hormones are present in vigorously growing plants. These plants have a metabolism that shifts and changes throughout its life cycle. These plants, when they're first starting to grow, have a different subset of hormones and enzymes than when they are fruiting and when they are having their seeds mature and they're in the end of their life cycle, right? And so, something that's really, really easy to identify. I went out and collected some blackberry earlier. It's a little wilted, not so happy. But blackberry is one of the most abundant forms of plant growth hormones that we can find because it's everywhere. It's an invasive species, so we don't have to worry about chopping as much as we can. And right now is actually an optimum time to collect these vigorously growing new growth tips. You see that snap? It's different than when it's lignated, when it's lignified and the plant is thick and it's hard and sturdy. It takes a shit ton of effort to try and pull out blackberries that are established, right? Well, the new growth is super tender, snaps super easily. This is actually full of plant juices. You can squeeze it and there's juice that comes out. The juice that's in there is basically like the blood of the plant. It's full of the phytohormones and the enzymes that signal to the plant to do certain things. Specific enzymes and hormones signal to plants for different stages of its life. So, cytokinins are a type of enzyme or hormone that upregulate cell division and influence the plant to produce lateral growth. Auxins produce vertical growth, and gibberellins fatten. So there's all these different things that will enhance the plant, and we can feed them directly to it. It's like almost like injecting someone. By foliar feeding, we can capture these enzymes and we can feed them directly to our plants. But these enzymes and these hormones are very unstable. They shift and change dramatically over time. And if we were to just cut this down, as you can see, it's already wilting. These enzymes have started to die off. The hormones are decreasing already, hours later. It's literally, I cut this maybe an hour and a half ago. And it is starting to lose its tensile strength. It's starting to lose its vigor. And it's evapotranspiring all of these things that were inside of it. The nutrients and the minerals and the water content that was inside this plant is being lost through the stomata in the plant. And so how we can capture that and retain it in a shelf-stable version is by mixing it with brown sugar. Brown sugar has a 1-to-1 osmotic pressure with water, meaning that for every molecule of sugar is present will bond with a molecule of water. So when we go ahead and chop up all this plant material and mix a bunch of brown sugar with it, the brown sugar is going to pull through osmosis all of the hormones, the enzymes, and the water-soluble constitutes out of the cell walls from the plant. It's going to literally, they'll move through the cells and they'll move through the plant tissue because it is being pulled by osmosis. That's actually what's happening right now. As this plant got cut, there's nowhere for it to pull more up from. It's not producing more enzymes, it's not producing more hormones, but the air is dry. It's got a specific pressure inside the plant. It's called, it doesn't matter what it's called, it's a complex term. You guys won't get it, or it'll take learning. But the point is that it's got a specific, like, evaporative transfer. There's like a pressure inside the plant that wants to evaporate. And if it's too dry outside, it's going to evaporate more and more and more. It's like when we're sweating, right? So if we cut the plant, we have to do this immediately. We want to cut the plant and then mix it with brown sugar so that that phase of all of that, the water molecules and the nutrients that are evaporating out of this plant then get captured by the water or the sugar, because the sugar wants to bond with the water that's present, right? So you put a breathable lid on this, you'll chop up all your plant material. I was gonna gather a bunch of this plant material. I wanted to gather horsetail specifically, because there's a lot of it here, but I was too late. That's the thing, is you have to capture these things during the optimal growth time. Otherwise, all those things are gone. It's pointless. You're not going to get the yield you want. It's going to be a drier plant material. It's going to have dramatically lower levels of these hormones, if any, because they've shifted into a completely different direction. And so what this looks like is it's actually a syrup after it's finished. This is fermented plant juice. This used to be brown sugar and plant material. This is actually pine tips. It is the candles that grow on pine trees. You know, the tops of the pine trees when they're growing in the spring, which is basically right now. It's actually just ended. I collected this a couple weeks ago. Those new growth tips on the pine trees are some of the most potent and concentrated forms of plant growth hormones that exist. They actually use it in commercial agriculture. They extract the hormones and the enzymes and they isolate them and they actually sell them as commercial plant growth regulators. You might have heard this term, PGRs. Well, there's synthetic PGRs that come from petrochemicals, and then there's natural PGRs. This is full of natural PGRs, and it's actually delicious. If anybody here has some water or a container, feel free to put a little splash in there and you can come try this. It is absolutely amazing. And the cool thing is, it's actually really good for us too. Because like I was saying earlier, we're not so different from plants. And so the hormones and the enzymes is actually good for us. We can drink this and it's like a superfood drink. It's got, and the different parts of the plant have different things, right? And so this was made from the new growth tips of the shoots, which are called candles, that are coming off of pine trees. But then you have the male pine cones and female pine cones. Pine trees are monoecious, which means they have both sex organs on a single plant. And so, I didn't know this, but pine cones are just the flowers of a pine tree. I never really realized that, but I wish I had, my phone's recording. But I have awesome pictures of different colors of pine flowers. Male pine cones, before they actually drop the pollen, are in this really tender, juicy stage. They're edible, you can chew on them and they'll burst in juicy, like kind of bitter, acrid flavor, but it's full of testosterone and estradiol and, like I was talking about earlier, cytokinins and auxins and gibberellins, but they have different ratios in the auxins and gibberellins than in the pine candles. Pine candles are mostly auxins because it's pushing for vertical growth, right? Pine, these right here, this is a male pine flower, male pine cone. This is concentrated in mostly cytokinins, which push for lateral growth. And it also has other benefits and other things that it does for plants. But essentially, what we can do is we filter out, we mix it with the brown sugar, and after about 3 to 5 days, all the sugar has bonded with all the molecules and the microbes and all the hormones and everything inside of the plant tissues, and it stabilizes it into a shelf-stable version that we can then apply to our plants at any time during the season. So this right here, you can use at a 1 to 500 ratio and spray it on your plants, and it's almost like crack for a plant. It's literally, it's actually really intense by itself. It's best combined with a vinegar, a living vinegar, because it actually balances it out, provides nutrients and other things. It's like feeding candy to a baby, right? Or you really don't want to overload it with specific things. You know, it's tasty, it's good, it will produce lush growth, but if you do it all on its own, it can actually make it prone to getting bugs because it's too much, right? And so by balancing this with a living vinegar, or like we can include another input in natural farming, it's called OHN, Oriental Herbal Nutrient. And we essentially combine a bunch of different medicinal herbs together, ginger, angelica, cinnamon, I forget the other ones, but it's a group of different medicinal herbs that are actually known in Chinese medicine for having different benefits. And that's why it's called Oriental Herbal Nutrient. And we do a few different extracts. The cinnamon is a hard, dry herb, so you can't mix brown sugar with it, right? But the garlic, which I didn't mention, and the ginger, fresh, they have lots of juices inside them. So you chop them up and you mix them with brown sugar, and the brown sugar extracts that, right? But to extract the other medicinal compounds, you need to use alcohol. So we do an alcohol extract with the hard, woody things like the angelica and the cinnamon bark. And then we do the FPJ styles sugar extract with the ginger and the garlic. Yeah?
I'm confused. You don't put this in the soil, you spray it on the plants?
Yeah, it's actually much more effective to spray it on the plant because it can uptake it through the plant's stomata. You can put it in the soil if you want to, but it's not going to be nearly as effective. It will take it up through the roots, and and it will have an effect. But the rate of application and the amount that you're going to want to use is a lot more. So like if you were going to feed this to your plants, you know, I don't know how big your garden is, but when you water your plants, it uses a lot more water than it would if you sprayed it on the plants. So when you spray it on the plants, just after sunrise or just around sunset, the plant has its stomata open. It's breathing still. At nighttime, the stomata open, and in the daytime, they close so that it can start absorbing sunlight. It's focused on intake of the sun, and at night, it's focused on breathing. So all of the stomata, which are basically the pores of the plant, we have pores in our skin, the pores of the plant are open and receptive to anything to enter. So during sunrise, there's actually lots of dew on the plant, right? Dew collects microbes and things from the air. There's dust, there's all kinds of stuff that's in the air. So this is a natural system that happens on its own, but our air has been toxified and is lacking in a lot of these things. It does have, you know, yeasts, and these things are live and active in the air. You can easily brew beers or various different things without having to add anything to it, right? Lacto fermentation, you can make kimchi or sauerkraut. You don't have to add the lactic acid bacteria to it. It's actually present in the air. It enters through the plant, and it's already going to do its thing. As long as you provide the right conditions, those things will survive and start to proliferate. And so when the plant is in that like receptive open stage, the pores are open, you spray these onto your plants, and it immediately takes it in and starts signaling to the plant literally immediately. So it's the difference between like, how would I correlate this in human dynamics? It's hard to really explain, but essentially it's like drinking Shasta water, really good, delicious Shasta water, versus chemically treated tap water from LA. You drink that, you're like, oh God. It's not going to have the effect. Plus, you need to have super vibrant, living soil that's healthy and has all the microbes. So the microbes can transport those things into the roots. Because something we've recently discovered is there's actually a process called rhizophagy, which says that plants actually exude through their roots. They do like a shotgun blast of these microbes. They're endophytes that live inside the cell walls of the plant. They shoot out these microbes into the rhizosphere, and the microbes go and hunt down and they feed on the rocks and all the different things inside the soil sphere, and also other microbes that are living in the soil feed on those and excrete things, and this whole ecosystem that happens. And then the plant sucks it back in with all these nutrients and everything that's been chelated and all this stuff that's happening within the soil, and it sucks it back in and uses those as fuel. But that requires the relationship to be active. It requires really healthy soil that has very diverse biology. We've understood now that our buscular mycorrhizal fungi, which are a specific type of fungi that also live inside the roots, they're an endophyte. They live specifically in the rhizosphere. They can't actually live outside of plant roots. That's because it's their host. And they live in the rhizosphere and actually extend the root's ability to find nutrients, to find water. It can actually expand the root mass of a plant by up to 10,000 times. This means that the plant has access to 10,000 times more nutrients, more water, because its root mass is that much more expanded. If it's only in this tiny little spot, it's only going to be able to access the nutrients right here, right? But if it spreads out and it's like all over, then it can access nutrients from this entire field right here. So what we do to do that is we culture the indigenous microorganisms from the forest, like I was explaining earlier. We use the rice, which have, it's hard to really culture those arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, but because you're culturing all the other organisms that live in this like holistic ecosystem, it's actually like, it's like a family potluck. Once you host it, they all want to come, right? And so once you have all of these microbes and you put it back into the soil, the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi come back. And these forms, these relationships will begin to reform. And we can keep the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi in there by growing cover crops and root masses of grasses and C4 grasses, which bring in a lot of carbon and put them into the soil. We'll build this root mass, and then instead of spraying it with glyphosate or tilling it in, which kills the microbial populations, we can just crimp it over at the right time, and the stems will snap and the plants die back, and it creates this nice thick mulch layer that protects the soil, and the roots are still in the soil. They haven't been fully decomposed yet, they're still slightly alive, but they're still, the plant is dying, all the energy went back into the soil for the roots. And then we can plant seeds or put a transplant in there, and those microbes that are now feeding off of the rhizosphere of those old dead roots or dying roots, the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi are present, and they'll move back into the new plant. And so it's all about just reframing how we're doing these cycles. And by culturing these microbes, we culture them from the forest, we can culture them in these syrups, and we can spray them on our plants, and we can apply them into the soil. There's different things for different things, right? Compost tea is great for putting directly into your soil, because what we're doing is we're taking a bunch of microbes that are in your compost pile for decomposing organic matter, right? And you take those organisms and you brew them in a tea, you add some more food, and the microbes will proliferate, and then you put them back into the soil, and they'll kind of feed the whole ecosystem. But there's also a missing component that most of us aren't really thinking about, or that maybe we aren't aware of, is that the mineral side is equally as important. Right now, we've been farming our agricultural lands for over 200 years. Imagine 200 years worth of nutrients getting absorbed into plants and getting trucked out the farm gate, going to the grocery store where people eat them, and then they go home and they poop in a septic tank. Where do all those nutrients go? They don't go back to the earth. We are literally mining the earth through farming of all of these minerals. That's why food today is so much lower in nutrient density than it was back in the 70s. Because even 80 years ago, 90 years ago, there were more minerals present in the soil. And we've been continuously farming them, and the top layer of the soil has been mined out. And the only thing we're adding back in is phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium. And so all of the micronutrients that are actually present in the ocean, you go to the ocean and you test, you know that sea salt is called like 88 elements or something like that? Or like you look at Himalayan sea salt. Well, when you do a mineral analysis of it, it's got like 80 to 90 plus different elements that are present in that salt. And it's because all organisms on the land once came from the ocean. And so the land we're all just a fractal image of each other and everything, right? And so our soils are lacking all of these micronutrients, things that are like at impossibly low concentrations. Like elements that we don't even understand or know of that are actually necessary for plants, but they're not there anymore. For instance, cobalt. Cobalt is a very important mineral for everyone. Did you know that you need cobalt too? It's a heavy metal. But B12 is actually cobalt. When we go to the grocery store and we find B12 supplement, it says cyanocobalamin. There's also methylcobalamin, which is a much better form of cobalt. Which cobalamin is a cobalt molecule with an amino acid. So cyanocobalamin is cyanide and cobalt and amino acids. So you buy B12 from the store, you're buying cyanide, cobalt, amino acids. But there's methylcobalamin, which is a methylated version of cobalt and amino acids that are really, really good for you. Your body uptakes it really fast and it metabolizes it really easily. Did you know that 80% of microbes need B12 in order to survive? We need B12 for our brains to function. Microbes in the soil are like the brain of the earth. And it's actually visibly obvious when we look at the neural networks in our brain and put them side by side to fungal networks. Fungal hyphae and neurons look pretty much the same. So mycelium are like the neural networks of the earth. They actually transport nutrients and minerals all over the place. If one plant, like in this forest right here, all of these plants are communicating to each other through the mycorrhizae. These mycelium can actually transmit signals across long distances, and then it can actually move water and nutrients as well. So the soil is absolutely important that we take into account all of these different things. And it isn't very complicated other than adding back what was once in the ocean, put it back on the land. We can ferment fish with this sugar, do the same thing with sugar, fish, and microbes from the forest floor. Put that into a barrel, into a sealed barrel, and you let that ferment for over a year to 2 years. That becomes a fish amino acids. The amino acids that the fungi create and break down, they're gonna break down all of the meat and the bones and everything in the fish, which have all of the minerals from the ocean. It's not just nitrogen, it's not just phosphorus from the bones, it's not just calcium, it's actually cobalt, molybdenum, even uranium and all these other things that are present in ocean water. And it's such tiny micro amounts. Lead, cadmium, all these things that we think are really bad for us are actually essential for life, just in the right ratios. But you start overloading your system with these things and it's really, really toxic for us, right? And so once we understand this, we can say, wow, we could just take some sea salt and some rock dust, put it back into our soil, add some microbes, and voila, we've got a healthy ecosystem again. That's actually functioning, that has everything that it needs in it. For instance, I did a soil test on my soil and it was really low in cobalt, low in molybdenum, low in silica, but really high in iron, excessively high in phosphorus. A lot of farmers, especially cannabis farmers, they never test their soil. They just keep adding fertilizers. They're like, oh cool, I do the same regimen every single year. I'm just gonna buy the same things, put them into my plants every single year without taking into account what's already there. So when we take into account these things, we look at the mineral profile of the plant or the soil, and we take the microbes from the forest and we look at the hormones from wild plants, we can combine all these things together into a holistic picture that will actually amazingly transform our soils, bring back all of the health of the plants, nutrients will start being absorbed, and we have healthy plants that are producing 10, 12, 14, 16 bricks in the leaf. And that tells us we have healthy plants with abundant minerals. And you can tell because they taste amazing. They have so much more flavor. When you pick a carrot from soil that has this abundant mycorrhizal community and has a bunch of nutrients in the carrot, that carrot tastes so sweet, it tastes so vibrant, you really taste the carrot, you know? I've tasted carrots from the grocery store that barely taste like carrots. Kind of tastes like carrot. Kind of just tastes like plant matter. You know, so by applying these things in a holistic framework, not just one thing, but we look at all of the different things. It's like putting a puzzle together. We have to think about all of the different parts that belong in the different places. We don't just put them all in the soil all at once. We need to think, okay, right nutrients, right time, right application. And we know this inherently through feeding babies. You don't just feed steak to a baby, right? It needs breast milk first. Because it needs the colostrum, and it needs like these various different, in fact, breast milk is full of hormones, it's full of microbial communities, it's full of bacteria, it's full of all these things that the baby needs to build the gut biome of its own system. It's actually essential. So when we birth our babies in a hospital and the umbilical cord gets cut immediately, all those nutrients that mother was transferring into the baby get lost. There's vital nutrients, vital hormones, enzymes, and microbes that are literally building the building blocks of a baby's life. And when it doesn't get those things, it's consistently sick and diseased throughout its entire life. It's so much harder to put that back into the person that was lacking those essential pieces from the get-go. This is actually the same for seeds. When we save seeds, we save them in a sterile, dry environment. When seeds sprout in nature, they go from a plant, they fall back into the soil, and in the soil, out in nature, there's wild microbial communities that are diverse and abundant, and as soon as that plant hits the soil, microbes and all these different things start accumulating on them, and when that seed sprouts, it has the biology ready for it. And those building blocks are part of the DNA that replicate itself over and over and over again throughout the whole plant's cycle. And so when we save seeds in dry, sterile environments over generations and generations and generations, these endophytic populations, the microbes that are responsible for plant growth and healthy immune systems of the plant itself, are lost. They're gone. We just don't have good seeds anymore. And that's why people are trying to breed seeds that are disease resistant, have these various resistances to certain diseases. But in the end, they're actually missing a critical component. And the indigenous knew this. They had a practice called corn magic, where they took corn seeds and they germinated them in water that they had previously boiled a root mass of grass. They would take grass and boil it in water, and then they would filter it out and take that water and sprout their seeds in it. Little did they know, or maybe they did, we actually take for granted the amount of intelligence that ancient indigenous cultures had. We think they were like, oh, this is legend and lore, but The truth is they know or knew more than what we know today. And they were taking this practice that had been passed down over generations and generations called corn magic. But what we know today through science is that what happened is the root mass had biology in it. And when you boiled it, there are certain microbes that survive the temperatures of boiling water. You know which ones those are? The endophytes that live in the plants. They're extremophiles. They can handle different extreme temperatures. Lactic acid bacteria is one of them specifically. Yeasts from the air will then come to that water because it's full of these different nutrients. And so that water is then full of those microbial communities that are the building blocks for life. They're responsible for plant health. They're responsible for immune function. So when they sprouted these seeds in that water, all of those microbes immediately pollinated inside the seed as it was germinating. Just as it's so important for our babies to get that colostrum and all those nutrients that are coming out of the umbilical cord directly into the baby at birth. This seed needs proper environments. It doesn't want a sterile growing medium. It doesn't want sterile water. It wants to be planted in living soil with diverse microbes. So if you don't have living soil with diverse microbes, you can easily add them. That's why they say if you put a seed in your mouth, it'll grow better. You ever heard that? Anyone heard that? No? You have.
Yeah.
It's an old wives' tale, right? So that's because our mouth is full of microbes. The saliva in our mouth has a bunch of lactic acid bacteria and different microbes that actually directly inoculate that seed before germination. So when it germinates, all those microbes immediately get first take. And that microbial community builds upon itself as the cells replicate. It's so much harder to introduce that later on. The seed is already germinated. Those genetic building blocks have already established themselves. They've already replicated multiple times over. And so you have a living plant that's struggling with a root mass. And then you put it into soil that's sterile and dead. It's gonna have a really hard time surviving. And then we're like, well, it needs something. So we put on some fertilizers. Oh, it's getting attacked by bugs. So we put on pesticides. Well, it's a never-ending story. It's literally nonstop. But you know, that makes the fertilizer companies and the pesticide companies a lot of money. And the pharmaceutical industry is doing the same to us.
Can I ask some questions?
Yeah, please do.
I want to know some details about the forced thing, that where you put the rice out there. That's raw rice, or you swell it in water first?
It's al dente rice, essentially.
You actually boil it?
You cook the rice, but just with less water.
So it just puffs up?
Yeah, it puffs up, and it's like it's almost done. You don't want to do like a lot less water, because then it'll be too dry.
I got it. So, but then when you put it in the forest, our forests are not natural, original forests anymore. You got from the fires, you got fire deterrent sprays. You got God knows what else.
Right.
So where do you put it?
Ideally, the best place is an undisturbed old growth forest.
Yeah.
Luckily, that's actually really easy to find around Mount Shasta. It's not so easy to find everywhere else in the world. But
Can you leave it there for a week or so?
It depends on the temperature. If it's really cold, it'll take quite some time. It could take a week or more. But if it's 80 degrees outside, it could be 3-4 days, and that rice will then completely inoculated and pollinated with these microbes, and you'll know because it's a solid mass. You can pick the whole thing up, and it'll be like this brick of rice. And you want to put it into a breathable box. You can put it into a basket, like, you know.
Or a cardboard box?
Cardboard box is not as effective because the microbes and everything will actually like feed into the box itself, and the moisture will rot it away. It happens very fast. So a cardboard box, if you put it out there and like it's pretty moist outside and moisture seeping up from the microbes, and when the rice is still moist, you'll try to pick up that box and all the rice will
Where do you
just
put
fall out.
it in? Screen?
Ideally, you want to put it in a cedar box because cedar is it resists rotting. So you can put it in any kind of wood box that's got holes in it and breathable. As I said, you can even put it in like a reed basket, some sort of basket. But you want to put like a paper towel or a cover over the top of it, and you want to make sure it's not going to get rained on. So you want to put like a tarp over the area, but not like suffocating it because it still needs to breathe.
And so then you take that and you spread it in your soil directly, or do you?
You can, but it's not as, you know, like you're gonna take that and you're gonna immediately put it in your garden and you have no more left, right? But what we can do is you can actually take a small portion of that. I don't know if you've ever cultured mushrooms before, but in mushroom cultivation, you can take one jar and turn it into 100 jars. Just by taking the grains from that jar and multiplying, spreading them across into the right medium, and the colony will expand, essentially. But therein lies that any kind of bad microbes that you might have had will also colonize. So it's important to have the right conditions and the right substrate. So with the rice, the next step after that, so that's item number 1. You take that rice and you mix it with brown sugar like we do here, and the brown sugar will use osmosis to pull out all the microbes, or all the moisture from the microbes. And those microbes, the fungi, the bacteria, all of these things, think they're going into a desert because all of the water is being sucked out of it, right? So because they think they're going into a desert, they actually sporulate. They spread all their spores so that they can replicate. And so when that happens, we have now captured a shelf-stable inoculum full of the microbial communities that were once in the forest. So we take that and we can mix it in some water, and then we spread that on the field, or even better yet, we take that water and put it into a compost pile, or we put it into a specific substrate of wood chips, oat bran, and crimped oats. Those 3 in a combo is actually the perfect growing medium for healthy mycelial communities.
Why wouldn't you just use a compost soil that you already have?
Well, because
There's
there's
a bucket full and put it in there.
right. Well, for a few reasons. If you just put it into a bucket full, then it doesn't have air, you know, and the community of microbes that are already in the compost are already established, so it can throw off the balance, right? And so if we want to do a proper capture of the microbes that were in the forest, we want to put it into a fresh medium. So wood chips are really good. Wood chips break down like really slowly, but they're really attractive to fungi. You know, I don't know if you've ever had a big pile of wood chips dropped off at your house. Within a week, it's like steaming, and you pull back that layer, it's got white fungal mass all over in it because it's really attractive to fungi. But it can also happen slowly if we do a thin layer. So what we want to do is we add the right amount of proteins, and it's the correct carbon to carbohydrate ratio. So we have a really big carbon mass. Wood chips are really high in carbon, like 200 to 1 ratio of carbon to nitrogen. And so we take that and mix it with some brown rice flour, or rice bran, It's like basically, it's not totally flour, but it's like it's a food for horses or cattle or something like that. You can go buy it from, you know, at like a food supply store, farm food supply store. You get that and some crimped oats, and you mix it together into a pile, and you make that your compost pile. But it's not a compost pile because it's not really going to decompose very well. It's not going to turn black. You know, there's not all the other microbes that are present in a compost pile. It's mainly we're capturing these like healthy fungal communities with a whole suite of other microbes that are along with it, that live together in a harmonious environment.
So it's like the sourdough starter basically, and you keep that and you keep taking from that.
Correct. And so you can build this pile, you know, you can build it as small or large as you want. Ideally, there is kind of a limit to how small you can build it, because if you build it too small, there isn't enough mass to hold the heat, you know? But if you do it too big, then it's really hard to contain it, you know? So the depth is actually the most important factor. You can spread it across like a whole room this size and do a very large pile. But then turning that by hand is ridiculous. You have to have a tractor, right? So on home scale, garden scale, it's like 1 bag of rice bran, 1 bag of crimped oats, and an equal pile of wood chips. You put those two, rice bran and the crimped oats, into a pile, you mix them together, and then you put a pile of wood chips next to it, and you're like, okay, that volume looks about right. And then you mix those together, and you make a homogeneous pile, and then you'll pour the water, you'll take your rice, the brown sugar IMO one, and you'll take that and you'll mix it in some water, and then you'll pour it into the pile. Ideally, we want to add the FPJ into that. We can add some vinegar and some other things because that helps with the microbial community to establish. It's got the growth hormones for the microbes. It's got these various different micronutrients and other things. Vinegar is actually the other key component. So I'm going to show you, we're going to strain out this material here, and then I'm going to actually mix water in. We're going to make vinegar. It takes a little bit of time, but.
How much more time? Just because we occupied this room for not very much longer, and
totally.
Our crew is like moving the
That
whole
makes
scene.
sense. No, this is literally, I'm going to strain this out, and what I was just going to finish with was showing you guys what it looks like, and then you guys can taste it. And if anybody wants to participate, you're totally welcome. If not,
I want to see it up close.
So this is the male pine cones after they've been harvested. So that's super delicious. I really highly recommend, if anybody's got a water bottle, they can pour some in their water bottle. So this is the brown sugar mixed with the male pollen cones.
It's not always that dry, but it just depends on what you're mixing.
Actually, it's super.
Oh, it's pretty
It's
wet. Oh,
super
just
wet.
hanging on top.
Yeah, what you want to do is just to prevent oxidation, because as soon as you cut these plants, right, it starts oxidizing. And so, yeah, you create a layer of sugar on top to prevent the oxidation after you've already mixed the sugar and the plant material together. You do a 1-to-1 ratio of plant material to sugar, and then all the sugar will bond with the plant material. And you can see here, these, chew that. If you want to chew on it, go ahead. It's like basically superfood snack. Sugary, piney. It's got pollen in it. So it's premature pollen. It's not fully mature. And pine pollen has all 28 amino acids. It's a superfood. It's got DNA repair. That's a little bitter.
It's like
bitter, sweet.
woody and piney.
Woody and piney.
So
Sweet.
the only thing I'm wondering about is the sugar. That's a completely modern,
Well,
highly processed
yeah,
food.
I do agree with
You
that.
can't use the plant material for that?
Not really. We don't really know of anything else that has the same kind of osmotic pressure. Salt does. That's gonna really, no. Honey has a lot of water in it. Honey is sticky. It It's not going to pull the water out. It's not going to act the same. It's a food source. It's sweet, but it doesn't have the same effect. Salt, you stick salt outside and it'll start absorbing water from the air.
That's why it's sour, right?
Exactly, because salt has the
Could you
same.
do it with salt?
You could do it with salt, but the thing is by doing it with salt, you're then salinifying. You're adding a bunch of salt, so that's minerals you don't necessarily want. The sugar, very low in those minerals. It's actually a pretty neutral thing, and we don't have to worry about salinifying our meat. So what this looks like is we literally see all that juice in there. Try to make sure it doesn't spill. But all of that juice right there, I'll definitely get to wipe this.
So this only has the pine.
Just the pine cones, the male pine cones called strobili. So these male pine cones, I am going to put that there. I'll finish the extraction later. You have a paper towel or
Yeah, we do,
napkin
yeah.
or something? Cool. Awesome. Do you have any cups or anything in the kitchen?
I don't think we do.
This is from the right.
This is actually from a few different types of pine trees. I think most ponderosa. Pine, yeah. You could, but fir doesn't have very large cones. Has very small cones, so it's not very effective. And there's
What about chips?
yeah, you can do it with the new growth tips for fir. You can do it with spruce too. Then you get spruce juice.
I guess CJ's taken over that role for the plant.
The
Fire's taken over.
he has,
But yeah, this has pine pollen in it and premature pine pollen. So pine pollen has like a bunch of stuff that's amazing for us, and you know you can buy pine pollen and bees search for pollen, and
Come join us though.
yeah.
it's got, like I said, all 28 amino acids. It's got testosterone in it. It's got
check the agendas too and see who's like the
what's the
featured
other
kind
thing?
of speaker.
I forget all the things that are in it, but it's basically like DNA repair, superfood, super amazing for you. And so I almost preserve this for my own. Just drink it, you know, mix it with some ginger tea and a little bit of spritzer water, and oh my god, it's the most amazing, refreshing summertime drink. But you spray it on your plants, mix it with some vinegar. So the cool thing is, after I'm done filtering this out, this leftover plant material, you can just mix water with it and fill it double the volume. So whatever volume is left of plant material, I will double that volume with water, and you stir it daily, and the yeast and the bacteria from the air will colonize in this and feed off of the sugar, and within a couple of months, 3 to 6 months, this will turn into vinegar. And this will be a living vinegar. You can speed up the process by adding a vinegar mother. Like you can put some apple cider vinegar in there, some unfiltered with the mother, you know. Put some of that in there, and this turns into vinegar. And what the vinegar does is the acetic acid bacteria in the vinegar will chelate the minerals inside the plant material and actually turn this into a mineral-rich vinegar that's like, so if you make vinegar from horsetail, you're going to be capturing a lot of the silica that's in the horsetail, and it'll turn into salicylic acid. And so you can spray that on your plants, and when you mix the vinegar with the FPJ, it's a complete food, right? Then it makes it into a complete food that for the plants, it's no longer like candy, like to a baby, it's more like a whole food plate that's like full dinner. So by doing this, this is how we can totally just like transform how we're applying nutrients and what we're doing in our garden.
So how do you do this?
Blackberry, same thing. You're just gonna mix it with brown sugar. You're gonna chop it up. And you can use nettles. Yeah, you can use any edible plant. You don't want to use, inedible, toxic, poisonous plants, because then, of course, you're just going to be spraying poison on the plants, right? But ideally, you can use any edible plant. Mugwort is a good option. Pumpkin is a great option. Blackberry is a great option, and you can grow these in your yard. So you never have to travel anywhere to go collect the material you want. Or you can go out to the wild and collect and do wild crafting you want. I collect a bunch of stuff, put it in a bucket.
You put all of the different stuff in there?
Ideally, you want to separate them because they have different hormones and different things for different parts of the plant's life cycle. So this, you can do it with the female pine cones, which are the seed cones, and they'll have enzymes specifically for seed germination and are really good for root formation, so it's good for transplants. That is one that's good for a soil drench that you can apply to the soil at transplant. Whereas this pine pollen, the pine cone one, this is best applied as a foliar feed during vegetative growth stage so that it can produce more lateral branching.
Is there an online source where this strategy could be studied?
Is there a what?
Online, is there a website where?
Yeah. Well, oh man, I forgot that piece of paper. I have an online community that I built that is specifically teaching people how to do this on their farm.
Okay.
And teaches people how to understand the different processes that are happening. And you can write it down or put it in your phone. SKOOL.com/stewards of Nova Gaia. Stewards, like steward of the earth. Stewards of Nova, N-O-V-A, G-A-I-A. I also I have a QR code you can probably scan with my phone.
Oh, that'd be good.
Yeah, let me, I'll stop recording.